If ever there was an underrated fighter, it would be the Hawker Hurricane. While it is known for its actions alongside the Spitfire in the Battle of Britain, and also playing a part in the Battle of France, few know about its major contributions to the British Air Force in general, and what it paved the way forward for. In the mid-1930s, the Royal Air Force's Fighter Command was an odd collection of biplanes, with no imminent development of a monowing replacement like what was happening across the world. This was due to senior staff seeing investment or adoption of a monoplane fighter as either foolhardy or simply redundant, with their opinions being that biplanes were still perfectly adequate. Lower-level members, however, were not as prejudiced against monoplanes, and so when the Air Ministry specified the demands of a new fighter aircraft in 1934, Hawker, spearheaded by Sidney Cam, would approach these people, as well as some more sensible minds in the Air Ministry, about a derivative of their already in-service Hawker Fury to be made into a monoplane fighter to fill the requirements. While this idea would attract some attention, and be fully fleshed out into the Hawker PV-3, it would not be selected by the Air Ministry in the end, as they would instead opt for the Gloucester Gladiator, which fit some of the more esoteric design requirements the Air Ministry was looking for, such as placements of guns within arm's reach for manually clearing jams. This odd request of the time showed the stagnant and somewhat conservative thinking that still hung around the higher levels of procurement. Thankfully, such odd requirements would be dropped later on when they were deemed impractical, as monoplane development began in earnest with the final remnants of stigma being either removed or paved over. Back in Hawker, Sidney Cam was not deterred by the Air Ministry's rejection and continued to work on the idea of a monoplane fighter. Halfway through the design, the power plant, which had at that point been the somewhat unreliable and troublesome Goshawk engine, would be replaced by the new Rolls-Royce PV-12, which would later be renamed Merlin. The complete design, with the new engine, new fuselage, and reworked aerodynamics would be submitted in late 1934 to the Air Ministry, who were quite satisfied with the results Sidney had accomplished. They would then order a prototype to be constructed. During the development of the prototype, a few design elements would be changed, such as the armament's location and quantity, and culminate in the aircraft K5083, which is the first example of a Hurricane. It would first fly in late 1935 and be introduced a short 2 years later, after some revisions and refinement with information learned from its test flight. Sidney Cam, through practical engineering and determination, had managed to develop Britain's first monoplane fighter, and quite a good one, too. While it retained some older design choices such as fabric-covered rear fuselage and a construction mostly consisting of wood, it was faster than every other British plane in service, and still almost as nimble as the old biplanes. It firmly laid to rest any lingering considerations of a biplane's place in the modern sky, and that monowing aircraft were the way forward to stay competitive. Had Sidney Cam's Hurricane not done this, the Spitfire could have been delayed, crippling Britain's fighter wing for the upcoming war. Quickly entering service and in large numbers, as production lines were set up across the country, it would be the first fighter that Britain sent over to France when Germany began its invasion. Against early Bf-109s, the Hurricane performed admirably, scoring a fairly high kill-loss ratio. However, one fault in particular was noted in the usage of 8.303 machine guns, which were ineffective armaments for the time, especially compared to the German 20mm cannons being mounted on their fighters, which packed a considerable punch. Following Operation Dynamo, the evacuations of Dunkirk, the Hurricane would then find itself being Britain's primary fighter during the Battle of Britain, being used alongside Spitfires to intercept German bomber formations, with Spitfires tangling with the escort fighters, leaving Hurricanes to pounce on the bombers effectively unopposed. After the Battle of Britain, the Hurricanes would begin to put into reserve roles within the RAF as the Spitfire became more numerous in the home fighter squadrons. Hurricanes would then go out to Commonwealth locations, some of which were still using the old Gloucester Gladiator, such as in the case of Malta. One of its more notable uses is in the North African campaign, where Hurry bombers, Hurricanes modified for ground attack using bombs, rockets, or 40mm anti-tank guns, provided effective close air support to General Montgomery's forces against Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps. It, however, did suffer high operational losses, as by this point the Hurricane was very out of date. While upgrades had tried to keep it on par, without a major redesign of the core, the plane was just impossible to eke out any more performance. Plus, with the Typhoon seeming slated to replace the Hurricane's role as a fighter bomber, and the Spitfire firmly holding fighter duties, the Hurricanes were simply seen as not needed, and ceased production in 1944, quickly followed by retirement from service at the end of World War II, bringing the total number of aircraft built to about 14,500. Of those 14,000, a few survived today to perform memorial flights within the RAF and sit within museum aesthetic displays. Though often seen as just the predecessor to the Spitfire, were it not for the Hurricane paving the way forward and proving to the Air Ministry that mono-wing fighters were the future, the Spitfire might have not been available in the numbers it was during the Battle of Britain, nor had a dependable brother to fight with over the English Channel. Without the Hurricane, it would be entirely possible for the RAF to meet the Luftwaffe with maybe a handful of Spitfires and exceptionally outdated Gladiators. But thankfully, the Hurricane was there, and Britain's Air Force was ready, thanks to Sidney Cam's efforts.